our body just sits in this comfort zone and literally atrophies.
You can cut the straps. Okay, they don't have to be there. You have control of this.
When you're nice to someone, your body releases serotonin. And if somebody sees you being nice to someone, it releases serotonin in them as well.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different life, a different environment, a different set. And the thing that makes a difference is the thing that you're missing.
Welcome back to the 90% Healthy podcast. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about something different than the past couple of episodes, because we've talked about physical health and the importance of physical health and how it can help you get to that 90% healthy sort of level. But social health is just as important, and emotional health is getting a little bit of undervalued. Wouldn't you agree, Don?
Yeah, I think that we're starting to deal with this social emotional separation. And there's a lot of people asking questions about it. And you and I have talked about this in the past, that I believe the majority of our ills are a result of our ancient DNA living in a modern environment. Our DNA, Homo sapiens won the battle of evolution because we could adapt. And that adaptation process takes challenges, and then our body is tuned to reward us for engaging in challenges and things like that. Well, we live in environments now where we're not challenged anymore. I mean, we live in houses that are flat. We don't even have to climb stairs. We live in climate controlled environments. There's food available 24/7, and it's this modern environment that our ancient DNA is maladapting to. And when you see this, we start to have problems with depression and loneliness and things like that. And I think it's accelerating right now with the advent and the explosion of handheld technology. Everything in life has a positive and a negative. There's huge positives that come from a furnace. There's huge positives that come from an air conditioning system. But there's negatives that come with that too. I think about, we talk about kids these days and they're not as active. Well, when I was a kid growing up, we lived in a house. We only had an air conditioner in one bedroom. That was my mom and dad's bedroom. And when it was hot, the boys were in there sleeping on the floor. But then most of the time we had a fan in the window and you were pushing the hot air out, and we did not stay in the house. I mean, we also grew up on a big farm. So literally you hit the ground running on the farm working. But now there's been such a huge change in society that the kids, instead of going out and playing in the neighborhood or doing whatever you do, they're connecting on Xbox and things like that. Now, they still have a very social environment. The connections that I see coming through technology are incredible, but you're not moving, you're not getting out, you're not challenging yourself.
Yes, it seems like it's a bit of a mismatch to what we evolved into this environment where
Exactly.
Everything has just become very available, very comfortable, and all the things we want is just literally a swipe away. So our body just sits in this comfort zone and literally atrophies. And we're not just talking about physical atrophy, but social atrophy, that cognitive atrophy that we see. It's really sad.
Yeah, and again, there are conveniences, okay? Don't get me wrong. When I lived in a house and we had a yard, I hated mowing my yard. I hated it. The only way I would get through it is I'd put a heart rate monitor on and I'd try to make it a workout. Okay, I'd say, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it benefit me more than just the yard look nice. And I guess I didn't do a good enough job mowing the yard. My wife eventually found a landscape company that took care of it and did not break my heart at all. Okay.
I bet.
But it's the activities of daily living. We don't even have to go to the store and shop anymore. We have online services. Our local grocery store will go pick all your groceries for. You don't even have to get out of the car. You pull up, put your tailgate up, they put them in, everything's done. So again, this environment that we live in, the benefits are, I don't want to argue the benefits, but you have to be cognizant of the impact, of the negative impact that it has on you and your DNA. Yes, I call it maladaptation, where that with a lack of activity, with poor nutrition, with poor sleep, with poor light, you get maladaptation. Whereas you have to consciously think about recovery. You have to think about, okay, what are the things I put into my life that are going to lead to improved cognitive performance, psychological performance, and just overall lifestyle.
And part of the environment is the people we surround ourselves with. And as much as our world has starting to revolve around technology, unfortunately, we have less and less human interaction face to face in real time than we used to. And it takes a toll on our body, and it could lead to, I mean, there are studies that are now linking depression with loneliness, and not even just loneliness on and of itself, but ruminating over how lonely I am and I don't have anybody to call. I mean, there are so many sad numbers in terms of people not having a single friend to call in an emergency. And these numbers don't seem to be getting a lot better. I mean, loneliness has really become an
getting
epidemic.
Worse. Yeah, they're getting worse. And it was funny. We're filming this right now on February 5th, 2025, and so we're now 2 weeks after the California fires, 3 weeks after the California fires in Palisades. And we were watching the Grammys the other night, and I was watching one of the stars or one of the singers talk about the fact that he met, because his house was burned down, and because of the fires, he met this other person, maybe it was a firefighter, that lived on the same street that they lived on. Okay. But he said, prior to the fire, I knew like 4 of my neighbors. After the fire, I know like 25. Just the change of environment forced you to go out and be gregarious and to interact. And and again, you and I are having this conversation right now. I'm in South Lake Tahoe, California. You are outside of Phoenix, Arizona. You and I, as we prepare for the podcast, we use technology to connect, and it's legit. It's a good, legitimate connection. Now, when we're in person and we give each other a big hug, that's even better. But it doesn't mean you don't have to. Now, we decided to do a podcast, which forces us to interact, and it's forcing us to think about these kinds of things. And truth is, I interact with far more people digitally than what I do physically. But I'll tell you, there's some times I'm just like, I say to my wife, I've got to go out. I go to the grocery store.
Gosh, I love going to the grocery store. Finally, I can talk to people.
Yeah, that's my thing. I'm just out interacting. So and listen, I am overly gregarious. I am a person who thrives in a crowd, but you just have to consciously think about it.
Yes, you do, because our environment sets us up for being lazy to call a friend nowadays. You just maybe text them or send them a voice note.
I don't use the term lazy. I think we want to be very careful and not judgmental here.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So there are things that cause you not to have to do the things that'll be better.
Uh-huh.
Listen, what's funny is that I don't like to exercise with other people. Okay. Most of the time, because I feel like you're holding me up. Okay. I tend to go at a rate a little higher than most. And I just like to train on my own. I get my headphones in and I really focus on what I'm doing. For me, it's a real flow generating environment. And again, for the listeners, my wife and I, we currently live in a fifth wheel trailer. We've done this for now almost 3 years, travel in the country. We're looking for a new place to live. And I have a Concept 2 ski ergometer. I have a bike ergometer. I have a sauna over my right shoulder. I have a red light system over my left shoulder. We did not make the decision to do this until I could figure out how to get exercise into this rig. Okay. We have kettlebells. I have big steel maces. I have things so we've got that work. But I'll tell you, we get a little bit of stability with what we're doing. I'm probably going to go join a gym somewhere. Just to be around other people. Now, I don't think I'll train with other people, but I'm just going to be around other people. Go ahead.
To that point, I did want to say that it's not necessarily that you have to engage in deep conversations with everybody, but just, passing by, that face-to-face, that smile, that hello, it means a lot to our physical and emotional self.
Absolutely.
Than we give credit for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also, just one more thing, I think it also ties into how if we live in a poor social environment or have poor social health, that would negatively affect a lot of the things you talk about with the 4x in the jar, your sleep, your energy levels, your willingness and motivation to want to work out.
Right. It's, again, there's benefits and there's positive and negative. There's positive and negative effects from everything what we do. And as I look at this, I think our challenge is recognizing the impact. Number one. Number two is, you just mentioned something I think is so important. I make it a point that when I'm out, I don't care what kind of a mood I'm in. When I'm out, I'm nice. I make it a point to be nice, to make it a point to smile. Thank you. Let me help you. Something like that.
Yeah.
Listen, there is nothing beneficial from reading the comments in social media. Okay.
Oh, no.
That there is nothing beneficial for it. Now, social media is an interesting part of society now, but I have to tell you, absolutely do not read the comments. Or when I do, I'm like, well, here you are again. This is the reason why you don't recommend reading the comments. And then what's also the other interesting thing is that in this RV environment, there's Facebook pages and things like that to learn. They are so negative. And I'm just like, ugh. I don't even go back to there. I posted a question the other day because we were going to be driving a route that we'd never driven before. And I was just like, hey, anybody have any on this route? And I got some decent comments back. It wasn't too bad, but I see some of these other things. And so what you consume is important, both physically and emotionally, psychologically. And again, I don't know what the fight or flight impact that comes with the negative comments. I don't know what it's triggering. There's obviously something there, but it is also degradative.
Yes. I kind of notched down a couple of things because as you were saying that you make an effort to be nice when you go out to the public. And I think it's so important to look at how it impacts your neurotransmitters and the way your body changes and its chemistry changes as you're interacting with other people. And not only when you're nice to someone, your body releases serotonin. And
sure,
if somebody sees you being nice to someone, it releases serotonin in them as well.
Exactly.
And it's such a cycle, and it's contagious in a very deep physiological level. I think it's important to point out, especially when it comes to mental health disorders, where people just kind of cocoon in and think that somebody might come and save them. And it's really you getting out there, you actually making an effort to be the human that you evolved to be.
Yeah, the development of neurotransmitters, the development of these small molecules, they're not just sitting there in a jar in your body and they release, okay? They are produced in relationship to something else you've done. Now, one of the things that I cannot let this pass without talking about, you've got to feel like you're safe, okay?
Yes.
You want to be in an environment, and for me, listen, I'm a 6 foot tall, 270-pound guy. I don't worry about most environments I'm in. For females, I know it's tough. It's hard to do, and you want to be in a safe environment. And you know what? I see some of these gym environments as not safe environments. I think they're very predatory at some point in time. So I'm not suggesting that you put yourself in an environment that you don't feel safe. That's critical. Okay. But it's important to nurture these safe environments. One of the challenges, we talked about HRV in our first episode, and HRV is measurement stress response. And when we're measuring stress response, trauma is brutal. And we traumatize at a really high level in our society. We do a really good job. And we do significant trauma. I mean, it's not the little stuff. We do significant trauma. So being able to deal with that's essentially like a restrictor. It's a joy restrictor, sometimes because of the fear response, which is eventually going to lead to depression. And some people are more susceptible to this than others. When we look at depression, there's biological factors, there's psychological factors, there's physiological factors, there's social factors, and then there's just other things that you can't even put in that category. But no doubt, in the absence of affirmatively trying to engage in activities that are going to improve not just physiology, but also the psychology, reduce depression, which is going to lead to a drop in loneliness because you're going to have a willingness to engage. This is what's so important.
And something you mentioned about HRV, and it's very interesting that you pointed that out. It kind of made me think of conversations that have been making headlines, how bad social connections and just places or social connections in social environments where you don't feel safe can also trigger, and arguments can trigger these inflammatory pathways.
Absolutely.
So if your social health is not put together and it's not protected,
Right.
it will impact your physical health and emotional health. So nothing in the body occurs in isolation. And we all know that everything is so interconnected that if you fix one thing, it will upstream impact another and vice versa. And that's why I wanted to talk about social health and just the prevalence of depression. I mean, over 20 million people in the US have experienced depression within the past couple of years. And these numbers tend to be rising. And I know potentially many of our listeners, including myself, have known people who have gone through depression in a phase of their life, whether it lasted for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or a couple of years. It takes a toll on you as an individual and those people who are around you. Because a lot of the times, the people around you may not know exactly how to approach you, how to try to, are they dragging you out of it? Are they going to sit in the mud with you and try to just let yourself crawl into or out of depression?
Yeah.
So I would love to ask you, Don, what would you recommend for somebody who has somebody in their life who may be depressed or who themselves may be experiencing signs of depression or lack of motivation for the things they used to enjoy? How do they address it? What are some of the 1% shifts that they should do?
Well, be a friend first. I mean, make sure that you are an unapologetic there for them friend. Now, you don't want a situation where it's going to drag you down. I mean, and that's certainly something you have to protect. Number one. Number two, I cannot express how important a good counselor has been to me and my family. And it started back when I was a wrestler back in the early 80s. I was struggling with anxiety, pre-match anxiety. It was manifesting in my absolute inability to win. I worked with a sports psychologist for 1 year and it changed everything. And I happened to have just a rock star sports psychologist. I was blessed. I mean, it was an absolute blessing. And Dr. Jim Reardon is his name. And it really helped me develop a taste for good counseling. I then went from Jim to where I had a very good friend I worked with after I got out of school, Dr. Mike Thompson. And Mike, again, the universe just put these people in my world. And what's interesting about it is that, Claudia, if I were going back to grad school today to finish my PhD, it would absolutely be in psychology. Because as I've been teaching physiology over the last 30 years, what I learned is that I can't get people to do something different unless I get them to change the way they think about it. Okay. I have to change the way you think about it. And again, because if you think exercise is boring and hard, yes, you're not going to do it. No one's going to go out and hit themselves with a hammer. And there's some people that think that's what exercise is. But when you take a look at it and you put it in the context of, this is part of not just my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health. All these things go hand in hand with my ability to move more, okay, to move better. Then we've got a reason. And again, it's that secondary impact. There's a lot of people out there that will just go exercise because they thrive on the dopamine. I mean, they just thrive on it and they're in the gym and they're going. Most of the world's not like that. Most of the world has to think about this. And this is the reason I go back. We've talked about trainable life events. It's important to not just, so you want to live in the moment. You want to be present. This is what's so important. A good friend of mine, Dr. Ron Garbo, he said to me one time, he said, stress only exists in regret of the past or fear of the future. Okay. If you're present, there's no anxiety there. And that's where the benefits of meditation, all the different tools that we do, that's where that comes into play. It also drives a response. There's a psychological process that's called flow the psychology of the optimum experience. And when you look at flow, when you look at the characteristics, concentration on the task at hand, there's a merging of action awareness, there's clear goals and feedback. Once you guys start to get those lined up, once you start to get, all of a sudden, you're getting the dopamine and the serotonin and the anandamide, you're getting all those things flowing. Probably has to be a physical aspect to it, but you can listen. I think you've probably done this. I know I have. It's a rainy day and I get a book and I get tucked in a corner somewhere, and all of a sudden I pick my head up and it's 5 hours later.
Oh yeah.
I'll never forget one time I was traveling, I was working, and I started to read Dan Brown's Angels and Demons. I just finished up the earlier book of the Da Vinci Code, and I was reading Dan Brown's Angels and Demons. And I probably started reading it either in Albuquerque or Los Angeles, flew back to Columbus. Literally the person next to me in the seat stood up to get off, and I closed the book and started to get ready to get off the airplane because I was locked in. I go home and I get home. It's late. It's 12 o'clock, 1 in the morning. And, give my wife a kiss, but I curl up in a chair in the bedroom with a light on, and I go another 3 hours. Okay. I could
That's
not
impressive.
put that book down. Okay. That was a flow experience. Okay. And my wife wakes up about every hour, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I go back to sleep. I'm just reading. So it's that flow environment. Can you get flow and exercise? You can. You really can. But you've got to get that goal on the horizon.
Yes. And I want to go back to that goal and just in that flow. Yes, you can get flow on your own, but you can also get flow with friends who mean a lot to you. Like, how many times have you sat down with one of your best friends and it's like time stopped and you just talked and talked and talked, and all of a sudden it was dark outside. So it happens to me all the time with one of my best girlfriends where times pass, but because we have such deep connections, it just feels so real, and we're so much in the present moment that nothing else matters, and we're just constantly in that connection. Our body syncs up so much. And on the contrary, I have experienced the other side of the coin where I feel extremely lonely and I feel like I don't really want to do anything. I'm someone who's lived in different states, moved from Europe. So I've spent a lot of time alone seeking friends in places where I didn't know anybody when I moved there. So I've spent a lot of time. Yeah. And then in work environments where I work remotely, there are days where I don't talk to a single soul. And those days I take a toll. I feel it. And I'm like, holy cow, the only person I may have talked to was my mom on FaceTime. It's just, and it's almost like I lose the skill. So even after the pandemic, when networking events started to get back up, I felt like I lost a muscle. It's like networking becomes this muscle that if you don't work it out, it will atrophy. So a lot of us think that social connections and being an extrovert is something you're born with, but it's also some skills that you can work on. Like, take the first step and crack that joke, initiate connection, because sometimes people just may be shy and they don't want to do it, but we're all hungry for a connection. Let's admit it.
No doubt. And again, I think again, environments changed. We're traumatizing at a pretty high level. And I keep going back to that because I don't think we pay enough attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's go back to the counseling thing real quick. So my wife and I have been married. We'll be married for 33 years on our next anniversary. And a good counselor has been part of our marriage. Okay. Having someone that we could turn to and trust and help us work through. There's nothing that says you're born with the skills to maintain an intimate relationship for a long period of time. Okay. It's a set of skills.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and you better be in love because it's a lot of work. But I'll tell you what, I've fired a lot of counselors. Okay. There's been a lot of times we've gone in to work within 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is going nowhere. And you don't be afraid to fire them. Don't feel like if you're not getting something significant back in that relationship, go find your next counselor. And when you find that good one, you will be so happy. It's been a blessing. It was a blessing that I ran into some really good ones early as I started to explore this. And I'll tell you, there can be kind of a resistance to dealing with counseling. I grew up on a farm. We were wrestlers. We can take care of it, you kind of had to say, there's something I want to work on here. And they're coaches. What it is, they're coaches. And when they're doing it well, you're feeling motivated. You're feeling like you're moving the needle. You feel like you're moving forward. So you asked me a little bit ago about how do we deal with this? I said, first of all, be a friend. Second of all, Claudia, if you don't have a counselor that you're working with that you can recommend, maybe it's time to find one. And I know that over the years, so many of the counselors I've worked with, there's a book I walk away with. Flow was the first one. Flow, the Psychology of the Optimum Experience. Jim Reardon turned me onto this. I consider it the most important book I ever read. Okay. And literally I teach it, that it's the psychology of enjoyment, not pleasure, not happiness, enjoyment. And so I go back to, if I'm trying to help someone exercise or compete or do something, I know I have to create a flow experience for them. So everything so literally I can go down the list of books, anywhere from, Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi down the. So listen, no one talks to me about being in a relationship without me talking about Harville Hendricks' book, Getting the Love You Deserve. So it's having that experience, that willingness to explore, that makes you a better friend and also helps bring your friends along.
And I wanted to add to that, we kind of talked a little bit about this before we hit record, is how important our sense of purpose is. And we've seen this over and time and time again in the blue zones, how connection and friendships and community does lead to a sense of purpose, where you are doing something great for another person, for other people, and that keeps you going. It's one of the easiest ways to have something, be excited to wake up in the morning, is to have purpose for something greater than yourself. And that's not always easy to find. I mean, it took me years to figure out what my mission, what my purpose was. That was not about me making me something.
You have to be intentional.
Yes, you have to think about it. Yeah. What is it what gets you excited, and what at the core of who you are? So you're not pretending to be excited about it, and you actually have the want and the will to make a difference in other people's lives and continue to learn along the way. Because regardless, you're going to have to learn as you grow older and as you start different journeys and as you meet different people.
No doubt.
It's very interesting. And of course, depression has been one of the issues where a lot of people deal with, and it's a setback. But nurturing those social connections, I think, is a very powerful way to shake yourself out of it.
Let's address that for just a second. I can see someone listening to this saying, I'm depressed. I don't want to talk to other people.
Yeah.
And it's a catch-22. And I think, so let's take a step back for that person that's listening and maybe struggling with this from the standpoint. And we talked about purpose. For me, I've never really struggled with motivation. I love what I do. I've been, I've been blessed in the ability to, my life has led to my life. But I had a huge turn in my life back in it would have been 2018. At the time I was working as a sports scientist at Ohio State, which Claudia, to that point, I thought was going to be my last job. I mean, it was perfect for me. But the entire time I was there, I was never comfortable. I was never settled. And I wound up having to leave. One thing led to another. And when I was making the decision to leave, I had several people coming in saying, what are you doing? Look at what but they didn't know the turmoil I was dealing with behind the work that they saw. So I get a wonderful offer to go work in the cannabis industry in Florida. So I go from this really cool program at Ohio State, sports scientist, coaching, just amazing people, to where I'm selling weed in South Florida. It was a medical marijuana kind of a thing, and we were building brand for that. But I'm sitting in my apartment down there. I'm living in North Palm Beach. I'm sitting in my apartment, had a great little apartment right on the ocean. It was very nice. Arguably what people dream about.
Yeah.
It's and but my wife and my daughter were back in Ohio. I was relatively lonely, but I was listening to a podcast and he said, you can't figure, and I was trying to figure, how did this happen? That was what's going through my mind. How in the hell did this happen? And they said you can't figure out what your purpose is until you understand your mission. And I sat back and I said, okay, Don Moxley, what is your mission? What is it, the things that you do that you love? And I came up, it took me a little while to work on this, but I came up with a personal mission of I help people understand the changes necessary to alleviate suffering and contribute to the betterment of well people. Okay,
Yeah.
that's Don Moxley's personal mission. And prior to that, it was Don Moxley, exercise physiologist, Don Moxley, professor, Don Moxley, sports scientist. Well, when I created the mission instead of the vocation, the world opened up all of a sudden. And listen, this is how you and I met. Okay, we never crossed paths unless I go from one company to the next and wind
Yeah.
up out in Southern California at this crazy little biohacking event. But what was really cool about it was we had a mutual love of HRV. We were kind of geeks on that. So literally we connected, bang, right,
Yeah.
right from the start. So for the listener, number one, you want to work this way. And I know it's hard. And if you're someone who has had to deal with trauma, it is, I mean, the straps that are holding you back are real.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to minimize that at all. But I also want to tell you, you can cut the straps. Okay, they don't have to be there. You have control of this. Again, a good counselor helps, but we talked about purpose already. We talked about the importance of purpose. What is out there? What's making you, and this is a good topic to work with a counselor on. Okay, this would be great to work with them on. But I call that my jar. Okay, purpose is my jar. But what we know is that if you don't move enough, you don't produce, movement produces happy chemicals. Okay. Now, too much movement, you can go over the edge, but the good stuff comes early.
Kind of the Goldilocks. You just have to find it.
Yeah. Anything is good. Okay. Anything is good. And you get to a real effective point very fast. So know that movement, you hack that with exercise. Our diets are affecting omega fats, the omega-3 fats that control the resolution of inflammation. There's not enough of them in our diets. Okay, we know that. We know that we have way too many omega-6s. Omega-6s are important. We just have too many of them. We have to get that balance with the omega-3s. So you've got to, in your diet, make sure you've got the little micronutrients that you need. Stop worrying about carbohydrates, fats, and listen, you can lower processed carbohydrates. There's no two ways about that. Those are inflammatory. And we can stop being afraid of healthy fats. We can stop being afraid of protein. Those are important. But it's the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the phytochemicals that we're finding are really critical. And these are going to come from good food sources or from supplements. Not all supplements, but some supplements. What we know is sleep is critical. The circadian rhythm, we have a rhythm in our body that is critical for this cycle that we go in. And when we're out of this cycle, it disrupts us at every level. So getting sleep right. And then the thing that drives the circadian rhythm is light. And we have this thing, I mean, we even have a diagnosis for some of it. It's called seasonal affective disorder. And, people who live in the Pacific Northwest or live in gloomy climates, they may need to get light on their skin during the day to fight depression. Okay. So light, quality of light and volume of light, it's so important to be out. Listen, if you've got a dog, you got to go walk that dog. We have one. I've walked him twice already today. Unfortunately, the first one was at 5:00 this morning, so I was using a flashlight. But then we went out when the sun started coming out, and we also try to walk when the sun's going down. I want that morning because that's what sets that circadian rhythm. So these all go hand in hand, but they all go in the jar of purpose. And these wind up being real important tools to reduce depression, to deal with loneliness and this sense. So I know you may be lonely. This may be hard. The steps are start moving. Pay attention to what you're eating. Try to work on your sleep. As you get your food right and your work right, sleep will get better. The right supplementation with sleep can be really, I know, listen, I've got a sleep stack that I take from supplements that I'm not taking. My sleep is trash. Okay. And I've just been experimenting with some things, and it's like, man, I went out, and so I'm just having to reset and go back to where I was. Measuring your sleep helps. This is where
Yes.
things like Aura rings and devices come into play. So having some kind of feedback on that is really important. And then finally, light. Get that light in your eyes at the right time. Get rid of bad light. Everything there's a toxic and there's a nutritive. So, there's nutritive light and there's toxic light. Okay. And there's nutrients in food and there's toxicities in food. And exercise and movement. There's nutritive movement and there's toxic movement.
Yeah.
So figuring this out and working on this is really a key to trying to break this cycle.
And I want to start to wrap up a little bit, but before that, I love numbers in a sense that just kind of give weight to what you just said in terms of that omega-3, omega-6 balance that we have going on in our world. And when I was working with a supplement company and we were launching an omega-3 supplement, I was working with the chief science officer to kind of explore and tell the story of why omega-3s are important. And apparently, the current balance and ratio of how much omega-6 and omega-3 we have in our diet right now is 20-1. It should be 2-1, if not 1-1. It's
Yes.
insane how terrible the current ratio is. You mentioned all of those things that fall in that purpose jar. And I do want to ask you about, what do you think our listener, because one thing that we don't want with the 90% Healthy podcast is to overwhelm people, all the things you need to do in order to be healthy and get that 90%. Where do you start? What is the one thing at that 1% that you want to dial in first and kind of tackle first or focus on first before tackling everything?
It's hard because everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different life, a different environment, a different set. And the thing that makes a difference is the thing that you're missing. So we got to figure out what's missing. So you start with a framework, okay? Let's start with the framework of, let's think about purpose. Now, the purpose doesn't have to be grandiose in this mission like we talked about. It can just be put a thumbtack in the calendar. This is a date certain. I'm going to do something today that, being in better condition physically and psychologically, I will enjoy this more. I hear too many stories of people that have gone on vacation and they come back and it was just a horrible experience, whether it was the people they're vacationing with or things like that. And that can happen. I go back to, I'll tell you, there's a book I read a long time ago. I can't remember it's the author of The 1 Minute Manager, but he wrote another book called Whale Done. You can't teach if you're trying to housebreak your dog, okay, and the dog goes to the bathroom in the house and you whack him with a newspaper and throw him out the window, all the dog learns is that after it poops, it's getting hit and has to jump out the window, okay? So you want to catch them doing things right. So that's why you take your dog out proactively. They do their business outside. You reward them. You bring them back. Well, imagine teaching a killer whale, okay? If the killer whale doesn't jump over the rope 10 feet above the water, do you jump in there and whack it with a newspaper? No, the killer whale will eat you. Okay, but so what you do is you put a rope on the bottom of the pool. The whale swims over it. You throw it a treat. Whale done. You
Positive reinforcement.
Catch people doing things right. That's part of what you learn in the 1 Minute Manager. Catching people doing things right. We just talked about that's just throwing a smile. Yeah. Okay, just being nice. That's what goes into that. So I think that's an important part of that. But I'm struggling a little bit right now. I've got a lot of thoughts going on, but one of the things I'm going to say first step is maybe start to measure.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us have a device on our wrist that probably offers some type of, the wrist measurement is not my favorite, okay? But it's a good start, okay? Start to measure how much you move. Start to measure how good your sleep is. Start to measure when you're in and out. So you have the ability to make some decisions. You have some data to work with. So to go back and answer your question, right now, I think it's like, if someone calls me and says, I want help with something, I'm usually saying, okay, I need you to get this device so I have some data so we can make some decisions together. That's where it all starts. Otherwise, what I was reading, I was reading something I posted several years ago. I think it was Deming. And he said, in the absence of data, all you have is opinion.
Yes.
And opinion is dogma, and it just isn't going to work for you. You've got to get that data. So I think to answer your question, start by measuring.
Okay. I think that's a good starting point for a lot of people, especially with devices and you're just getting blood works done and you're really understanding where you are. And then you can start to create a framework and the path to where you want to get, but without overwhelming yourself.
Well, and I'll tell you another interesting story. Now we're running a little bit long here, but let's go ahead and finish the story.
Yeah.
When I was early in my career, I was working in a sports medicine clinic, and we developed a corporate wellness program. And we had companies coming to us asking us for help with corporate wellness. Well, we had this one company, what they specialized in was school promotions. Like if you want to raise money for the band or things like that, you got kids out there selling chocolate bars and pretzels and whatever. That's what this company did. And I had this preconceived idea that, oh, they're eating, there's too much chocolate, there's too much junk in their diet. Well, we went in and did an assessment. So the first thing we did is did an assessment. Their diets were amazing. Okay. They were sick of the chocolate. They were sick of the pretzels. They said, you get over this in about a day.
Yeah.
What were they doing? 3/4 of their people are outside smoking. And so this is back in the day. So my intervention when I went in with no data, just opinion was, oh, it's a diet problem. It wasn't a diet problem. It was a stress management smoking problem. So we went smoke cessation. So we got data. We made a decision. It was a great intervention. So again, these things they go hand in hand, but it starts with data.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, well, start with data. And I do want to challenge our listeners to one more little challenge where, because we talked about depression and because we talked about the importance of social connection, to go out there and take one action towards strengthening the social connection that you already have, whether it's a friend you haven't talked to in a while, whether it's a family member you haven't caught up with in a minute, somebody who you can just deepen connection a little bit more and make that effort to step outside of your bubble and interact with people in real life. If you can't, then over the phone, but it has a bigger impact than you would think.
Let's take it one more step, Claudia. If you don't know who to reach out to, okay, reach out to us. Okay.
Yeah. Yes,
this is something
like
that we do. And that if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to do something different, but I don't know who to talk to, I want you to reach out to us. You can find us on social media. You can reach out to us a lot of ways. Reach out to us. That's why we're here. We'll be glad to help. Now, are we going to be lifelong friends? Well, probably, but I'm going to work on helping. Claudia's going to work on helping you figure out, okay, what is it? How do we get out of the mud? What do we need to do to get pulled out? So if you don't have someone, start with us.
Yeah. And if, you don't want to comment yet, subscribe and like, and just keep on following. And when you're ready to say hello, we're going to be there on the other side saying hello. So thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much, Don, for taking the time. And of course, throw in the knowledge bombs left and right.
Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good one.